This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Hello, good afternoon, bona tarda. Welcome to week 4 of Radio Hadrian. Monday is the start of Wimbledon, the tennis tournament, the British tennis tournament. And I'm not a great fan of tennis, but having lived in Australia for many years, it was something you couldn't escape because I lived in Melbourne and we also had a Grand Slam tournament, which was the Australian Open. And of course, over the years, Andy Murray became a very prominent figure. Andy Murray today spoke about a responsibility that he feels towards playing well at Wimbledon. Now, you would be forgiven for thinking that as the world's #1 seed, Andy Murray would always have a feeling of responsibility to do his best. However, he had a special reason for saying this today, and that reason was he wanted to pay tribute to the victims of recent, I'm not going to call them terrorist attacks because I don't believe there were terrorist attacks, but recent events in London and in Manchester. So with the Grenfell Tower, Finsbury Park Mosque, the Manchester Arena. And he said he wanted to give people something to feel good about, to feel positive about. And I would probably think, well, knowing Andy Murray the way we do, that he would have avoided being political. Every time he makes a comment about politics or about nationality or independentism, he gets it wrong, he gets criticised. So I should imagine he was also alluding to the fact that in the UK at the moment there's absolute chaos. And there's a lot of very unhappy, very confused people, but very angry people, and probably people who are scared of the future of this country. And I make no apologies for saying the UK, and that includes Scotland. Unfortunately, it still includes Scotland. So Andy Murray has indicated he feels this responsibility, and I think good on him. I hope he does play well. I don't watch it, but good luck to him. And I think he's a charitable person. He gives a lot of money to charity. His mother gives a lot of money to charity. And on the whole, I think he's a pretty good person. Those of you who may not know anything about Andy Murray, if you don't follow tennis and you don't come from a tennis country, you probably wouldn't know who Andy Murray is, but here in Spain, Catalonia, of course, there's Rafael Nadal, and so people here would be aware of tennis. Okay, Andy Murray was at primary school 20 years ago. He grew up in a small village in Scotland, a village called Dunblane, and 20 years ago he was at primary school. At that primary school, a terrible event took place, which is now known as the Dunblane Massacre, where a gunman entered the school and gunned down almost a whole class of children. Andy Murray's tribute to the recent events in London and Manchester has a connection for him with the events of his childhood. Okay, no more about Andy Murray and no more about tennis, but the connection for me with oh no, I said no more about Andy Murray, but there is a connection with what he said and what I was going to talk about anyway. So if we, away from London, we go up north to Scotland, and we've got a very disgruntled population. We've got a lot of angry people. I don't know how many of you might listen to this, but there probably would be a fair few of you who are frustrated, angry, feel betrayed by the SNP. This program and this radio program is not it's not just about bagging the SNP, but the SNP happen to be party in government, they are the party with the majority, and they are also the party who are supposed to want independence. At the moment, we have a perpetual carrot being dangled in front of voters' eyes regarding a referendum. The referendum and First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's comments on the referendum are always couched in real politics speak. Maybe, perhaps, when this is finished, when that's finished, when Brexit's over. Now Brexit might take, 5 years? So when it's a bit clearer. When we've finished the public consultation, there's always a when or an if or a maybe, and there's never any action. How many of you knew that there was a public consultation regarding the referendum process? It wasn't a public consultation about independence. It was a consultation which the First Minister initiated after the general election to discuss the technicalities of a referendum process, the franchises and the fundraising. There was nothing in this public consultation that asked the public, do you want another referendum? The SNP also raised funds for another referendum, and before this public consultation took place, they had already decided to return these funds to the donors. These were funds that they raised for a referendum, and they very quietly returned those funds to the donors before having a public consultation on the technicalities. And if you ask me, I'm not an expert in these things. These are my feelings, my views, my intuition. But it's just more chaos. It's more muddling through and keeping people hanging on, wondering. It's almost as if all of those new members that Peter Murrell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, worked so hard to get into the SNP, all those thousands of new members post-referendum 2014, that made the SNP the third biggest party in the UK, which made them a mainstream party. It's almost as though all of those members needed something to think about. Well, they've certainly got something to think about, because there's no independence discussion. There's no talk of independence from the SNP. There's lots of what ifs and maybes and maybe this and maybe that, while the SNP kowtowed to the establishment of the UK. So what would you do if you were a senior member of the SNP and you are aware that you have a very frustrated, disgruntled membership? You have people leaving the SNP membership, cutting up their membership cards, throwing them away, joining other parties. The Greens are probably going to do very well out of this. So what would you do if you were within the SNP and you were aware that the grassroots movement is fractured, the grassroots movement that took the people of Scotland to an emotional high in 2014, that thought they were going to get independence from a referendum? And of course, referendums don't bring independence. And no matter how many referendums Scotland gets, it's not going to bring independence. But amongst these people, there is a growing number of people who are talking increasingly about setting up a new party. There are people talking increasingly about UDI, setting up new parties, UDI, breaking away, and people who have no trust in the SNP. People who once did trust the SNP, like myself. I've been a member, or I had been a member of the SNP for years. And I cut my membership, well, I didn't cut it up, I threw it away after the referendum. What would you do if you were a senior member of the SNP and you were aware that this was happening? You hear people talking about the need to set up a new party, to break away from the SNP, who have failed the people, who've betrayed the people, who are not going to deliver independence, who have just become a mainstream UK party, and who don't have Scotland's interests at heart. They have their own pensions at heart. What would you do? Because if the people do follow their own pathway and they break away from relying on politicians, which I think they should. I'm one of these people. I totally believe independence will only come through the people. It will come through people declaring independence and taking control of their own destiny, not relying on politicians and processes. So if you were a senior member of the SNP, I'm sorry I've said that 3 times, but what would you do? You need to keep your membership, you need to keep your job, you need to protect your career and your pension, and you certainly need to protect your integrity and not be found out to be deceiving the people. You would have to create a new party. We need a new party, but it needs to be a people-driven party. In fact, it probably needs to be a non-political party, if you could call it that. It needs to be a party, or let's say a group of people, or a movement, but not a political party. Within the senior ranks of the SNP, there are disgruntled members who I predict will break away from the SNP, will create a splinter party. Who am I thinking about? We've got Kenny McGaskill, who's been heavily critical of Nicola Sturgeon recently. We've got Tommy Sheppard, who has always had who's always had a different position and different views to the rest of the members. He's always been different. For the life of me, I've always wondered why he's in the SNP and why he doesn't stand as an independent. So we have 2 people, at least 2 people, who I could easily see breaking away. I would suggest that Kenny McGaskill has long since had aspirations of being a leader. So it would come as no surprise to me whatsoever if he did break away and create a new party. And Tommy Sheppard, I think, would easily be his sidekick. I don't see Tommy Sheppard as having aspirations of leadership, but I certainly see somebody who hasn't toed the party line, who's always been different to the other members. Okay, so by doing this, let's hypothetically say McGaskill and Sheppard create a new party from within the ranks of the SNP. All they need to do is to get a vote of no confidence in the First Minister, or gather together a group of politicians, a group of members, and simply break away. By doing that, they feed the voters' hunger for a new party. They create a party and can say, okay, we're not happy with Nicola Sturgeon, we're not happy with the SNP, Follow us. Come on, we'll lead you to independence. You know. Now, by doing that, the people may be far less likely to then create their own party, thus stalling UDI. You don't need to set up a party for UDI. You don't need to do anything apart from declare independence. And by doing this, the people will have an experienced leader. They'll already have people that they have trusted in the past, who come with a bonus because they indicate unhappiness with the current SNP leadership. So, for the ordinary person, it's much easier to rely on an established situation than to set up your own party. That requires a bit of planning. It requires legal processes, membership, constitutions, manifestos. There are plenty of ordinary people out there in Scotland who could do that, but it's a lot of work and much easier to rely on a party that comes from within that says we're not happy with the SNP. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about today, I'm having a bit of a ramble, I think, because there were so many different things I thought of talking about today, probably because there are so many things happening within UK politics and within Scottish politics that it was difficult to say, oh, I should talk about this or talk about that. Fracking. Fracking is a filthy, dirty word. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Scottish politics and the current affairs in Scotland, in 2015, the then Minister for Energy, Fergus Ewing, created a moratorium on fracking. Fracking is a process, again, for those people who don't know what fracking is a process of extracting gas from under the earth. And to do that, you need to fracture the ground. You need to crack the ground open, and then you flood the underground spaces with water, which then extracts the gas. That's a very, very simplified explanation. It is obviously a lot more technical than that. But fracking had started in Scotland, and it created such a lot of controversy that the Energy Minister was forced to have a moratorium on it. That moratorium currently is still in place, but for the first 5 months of this year, so from January to the end of May, a public consultation was created on fracking, and some of you in Scotland may have contributed to this consultation. I did. It was a very tedious consultation. I don't think it was very well set up. The questions were repetitive, so I had to give the same response to multiple questions. However, the current Energy Minister is Paul Wheelhouse, and he apparently has collected these responses, but has announced that it's going to take up until the end of the year for him to make his decision. I could say I fail to see the reason why anybody would allow fracking, but if you can see both sides of this. Fracking is a non-renewable energy source. It provides jobs and it provides cheap energy. Those are two things which any country in today's economic situation would welcome. However, the downside of fracking is that it produces horrendous health effects. I don't have time on this radio stint to go into the details, but if you look up fracking for yourself, if you haven't already done it, some of you may know much more about fracking than I do. If you Google fracking and look into it, you will find an absolute minefield of information. Most of it will highlight the hazards of fracking, the irreversible hazards of fracking. And one of the worst hazards is toxic water, because that water that is pushed underground to extract the gas then returns to the surface. It gets into the land water, so the surface water. It gets into drinking water supplies. So in Scotland, we've, outside Glasgow, again for people who may be listening from outside of Scotland, there is a loch called Loch Katrine, and this supplies drinking water to the bulk of the Scottish population. This water is so clean and so pure that I've often wondered why Scotland needs to have bottled water. This is one of the best drinking waters in the world. The idea that fracking would inevitably poison that water is, to me, unthinkable. That a government would allow its country's drinking water to be poisoned. It's a form of genocide, if you allow it to go ahead. And of course, well, I'm not going to go into the long list of fracking hazards. I've written an article about this for the iScot magazine, which hasn't been published yet, but hopefully it will be published before the announcement comes from Minister Paul Wheelhouse. In the process of making whisky, Scotland's most famous export, you need to use water, and that's water. Scotland's beautiful water is one of the things that makes whisky such a diverse product, that gives the different flavours to different whiskies, to all the single malts. They have different flavours and different aromas, and that's because of the water. That's because of the land that the water runs across and runs through. That industry will be incredibly damaged by fracking. So if that were the case, if it was a straightforward case of okay, fracking is going to poison drinking water and it will also severely damage the whisky industry, you would imagine that the Scottish government would say no fracking. Particularly as Scotland has a wonderful resource in renewable energy. We have windmills and we have sea. Both can produce energy. In fact, during the 2014 independence referendum run-up, former First Minister Alex Salmond made a big thing over Scotland being a world leader in renewable energy. I'm not sure you can boast that if you allow fracking. So why would the Scottish government allow fracking? Well, at the moment, the biggest energy company in Scotland is called INEOS. It's a European company, and INEOS is based at Grangemouth, which at the moment is an oil refining company. INEOS is very pro-fracking. INEOS is desperate to get fracking in Scotland. This means a lot of money to INEOS. They claim it will create a lot of jobs, but renewable energy companies can also create a lot of jobs. INEOS has a lot of money and a lot of clout. It is an incredibly powerful company. It ran the first public consultation and has good relationships with Paul Wheelhouse and Fergus Ewing. There is another energy-related company called Hydracat. Hydracat is a drilling company which is based in Motherwell. Motherwell is a very large town just outside Glasgow. And Hydracat met with Paul Wheelhouse before he became the Minister for Energy. They had a private meeting with him, and at that meeting they donated £27,000 to the SNP. Bobby Hill is the director of Hydracat. He said to Paul Wheelhouse, should fracking go ahead, we will be more than happy to provide the drilling expertise, while at the same time giving £27,000 to the SNP. I sincerely hope that Paul Wheelhouse puts Scotland and Scotland's children first and says no to fracking. A permanent ban, as many other countries around the world have. My gut feeling is that he will allow fracking. He'll allow fracking because of the money and the power of energy companies. There are many industries in Scotland that rely on water. So even without poisoning your population's drinking water, there are many, many industries that rely on water. And in Scotland, apart from the whisky industry, we have a farming industry, and the farming industry is generally not terribly happy with the SNP and the Scottish Government's policies. Some of that is tied up with Brexit, but farming would be hugely affected by toxic water. Crops can't grow on land that is poisoned by shale gas water. Shale gas is another name for the gas that's extracted through fracking. So our primary industries would also be affected. The crops we grow, and obviously sheep and cattle are also going to be affected because they eat the crops, but they also need water to drink. So we have got a secondary hazard which is going to affect Scotland's economy. And I think last week I mentioned Aberdeen Angus beef, and we can't export meat, lamb and beef, if it's not a pure product. So the reputation of our farming industry will be affected. Okay, I think in future I might devote a whole program to fracking and go into a lot more detail and give you lots of resources and more information about it. Although it's possibly too late. It will make no difference to Paul Wheelhouse what anybody says now. Let's just hope that the man does the right thing by Scotland. Although being a member of the SNP, that is somewhat debatable. Okay, that's me for this week. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Bye for now.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.
Good afternoon, Scotland. Bona tarda, Catalunya. This is the 4th chapter here in Radio Hadrian. I'm David Rabantos, and I want to keep encouraging you to share away this program. We're growing, and there's hundreds of people listening to inconvenient truths that you cannot hear anywhere in mainstream media. And if enough people listen to the truth The truth is the most powerful weapon, and will bring down the system that keeps us under the British and Spanish yoke, and will declare independence. People will do it. Today, I would like to dedicate myself to talk a bit about Leo Strauss, which is possibly the most influential, but not the most known philosopher in the 20th century, and the effect he has in our lives. I would like to introduce you as well to the 25 rules of disinformation, which is something we suffer in political life and also in social media, where people are intent of destroying the truth, and they have a well-defined set of rules that to the innocent bystander might be difficult to identify sometimes, but today we're gonna outline them. Third, I would like to bring the person of Oriol Junqueras, which is the Deputy Prime Minister in Catalonia, and is gonna be the next Prime Minister in Catalonia, but not the President of Independent Catalonia, because he's been elected and chosen by Spain for the big deception and to run Catalonia under our independentist flag, but never to declare independence. Something that probably rings familiar to Scottish people. Then I would like to make a summary about or a summary of the Scottish process to independence from the referendum, since the referendum, which is when I got in touch with the Scottish independence process. And I'll give an outline of Catalan news, because in this information time, it's more like disinformation time. We always say the same thing. We need to unite the Scottish and Catalan people, and this program wants to be a tool or a bridge to accomplish that. They lied to us in this day and time. They lied to Scottish people, telling them that they need to march like Catalans to get independence, and they tell us that we should have a referendum like Scottish did to get independence. But none of them is true. No amount of marching is going to bring independence to Catalonia, and no amount of Scottish-style referendums is going to bring independence. The only thing is to discover the master plan, the plot. Yes, the conspiracy theory, because as we explained last week, conspiracy theorists are the good guys, the intelligent guys, the honest guys, and people labeling them as the CIA invented in what is considered to be the longer-lasting propaganda campaign. Conspiracy theory label was used to silence the truth. So here, David Raventos, your conspiracy theorist, is gonna tell about all these topics we've talked. Leo Strauss, as I said in the introduction, is one of the most influential, if not the most influential, political philosopher of the 20th century. And its influence is running deep also in the 21st century. Leo Strauss was born in Germany in 1899, but he had to move to the United States in 1938 because of his Jewish blood or origin. And escaping Hitler, he came to United States, where he was teaching philosophy in the University of Chicago, which most of you or some of you will know, which is where the people running the world nowadays, lots of them studied there. Their liberal and their politics spring from there. Also, the Bilderberg Club has a lot of people that studied with Leo Strauss, so he is somebody that most of us haven't heard of, but he has a tremendous influence in our life and in the way that our countries are ruled. Leo Strauss, for instance, to put an example, he coined the term reductio ad Hitlerum, which is when he invented that in 1951, and then he published it in a book in 1953. Reductio ad Hitlerum is when to try to attack or pass somebody as none to be trusted, we make some fallacy relating to the fact that, well, he agreed with Hitler in a certain point, and the fact that Hitler thought the same about something doesn't mean that that is per se wrong. and he coined this concept. But far more important in our everyday lives, when we're talking about Leo Strauss, is his theory about permanent lying to the whole world the whole time. Leo Strauss divided population in three classes. One covers like 99.99999% of the world population. It's like the base, the mass, the sheep. His orientation, not mine. And he says that 99, people are lazy, non-intelligent. They need to be led. They need to be made feel that we are free, but we are not. And we need to be deceived systematically. And I need to emphasize, this person is the one that has influenced people running the United States, running the world, getting together in the Bilderberg Club. So we're talking about how the world is run. It's not theory. He was a theorist, but people following him has put it into practice. So all of us are systematically lied to about everything. Then it doesn't matter that we have the right to vote if we don't know what we're voting. But the second class for him was the Gentiles, which is like selfish group of people, which are people in government and in politics. He considered it a necessary evil. Okay, these people think they're great, but they're just tools. And then finally, it's the wise men, which means it's people that have absolute truth and that they use governments to lie and manipulate the rest of the population. So that's it. That's why we shouldn't believe anything we see in mainstream media, not on one side or other side of the divide, because all mainstream media are there to hide information and to manipulate our brains. It's something that is completed from school. Schools are not there to teach us or to help us to think. Schools are there to make consumers, voters, taxpayers, spectators in sport and TV. We are just to be like the fodder for the system run by the few people Leo Strauss considered the wise men. And we need to apply this to everyday things, and then we'll understand how they manipulate us. And I'll put some examples close to home. Independence of Scotland or Catalonia can never have 99% of people on one side of the debate. Remember, Leo Strauss said you need to lie to 99% of people, So the lie is not if independence is good for Scotland or is bad for Scotland, because you would only be lying to one side of it. You would never be lying to everybody. So the lie has to be something more internal, something non-debatable, something nobody will be allowed to ever discuss. And when you have that in your mind, then you have to start doing logical proposals that would lie to everybody, both unionists and pro-indie people. An example of the lies that we have been made to believe is Nicola Sturgeon works for the independence of Scotland. That is a lie. She's a member of the Privy Council. She hasn't declared independence, having 56 out of 59. In Westminster, had an overall majority. In Holyrood, did nothing to avoid the referendum rigging, did nothing to expose the referendum rigging. If you put that in a computer, it would tell you that Nicola Sturgeon works for London. I mean, nothing can be more obvious than that. But that's a clear example of how the Leo Strauss lies to lie to everybody works. Because neither unionists nor pro-indie people think that Nicola Sturgeon works for London. So that it must be the truth. It must be the truth because we have accepted that they're lying to us, and that's how it works. So unionists wrongly hate Nicola because they don't know she's protecting the union. And pro-indie people wrongly love Nicola Sturgeon because they think she is working for independence. It's not the case. Both sides are lied about it. The lie is she doesn't work for independence. And then you are on different sides of the lie if you are a unionist or you're independentist. The same applies to the SNP. People wrongly believe SNP to work for the independence of Scotland. Whether they're unionist or independentist, they're both wrong. And the same applies to referendums, both in Catalonia and Scotland. Both unionist and pro-indie people wrongly believe referendums to be a tool for independence. So both unionist and pro-indie people are being lied about this, because the truth is that only UDI brings independence. And we could go on and on and on. People would think that Catalan parties work for independence. That's a lie that 99% of people believe. People think that Corbyn is a challenge to the system. Well, it's not. If he was, he wouldn't be allowed to be here. So that's about it. The world is run on lies. They lie to us to scare us with avian flu and Zika, and they create economic crisis, they invent wars, they do false flag attacks, and we never get the truth because they have mainstream media to lie to us. So that's it. We need to study a bit more about Leo Strauss and see how the world works, and then make for them to lie to us, and then we'll be closer to independence. I'll go very briefly about the 25 rules of disinformation. Both in media and in social media, we encounter lots of times, especially those of us who go against the vast majority of people, which are the ones following mainstream media. We encounter people that have a set of behaviors. And people might think that it's accidental, it's people in good faith, but we have to say that normally that's not the case. A lot of people hiding behind so-called pro-indie profiles, both in Scotland and Catalonia, work for London or Madrid. And they use something which has been named by Dr. Sweeney, the 25 rules of disinformation. We won't read them all, but we'll put attention in some of them. When you start attacking, or when you start saying with evidence and with logic that the SNP is not working for independence, sometimes they jump at you and they demand proof. Well, what more proof you want that they don't declare independence with 56 out of 59? They had a manifesto in 97 saying that that if they had majority in London, they should declare. There was an article in Bella Caledonia in 2015 saying that if they got 20 to 25 seats in Westminster, it would be reason enough to bring it to the grassroots, all that. But you always have people demanding proof that they don't want to accept. That is a rule of disinformation. Another relevant one is to demand complete solutions to big problems. When you explain that a party run by members of the Privy Council that sing God Save the Queen and that they go to Ascot in their best hats are not really working for independence, they start asking you, what would you do? Well, we'll decide together what we'll do. But that's just a way to dodge the issue. The first thing is to realize that those we trust are not working for us, and then all together we'll find the solution. Another one is to call people conspiracy theories. We already spoke that this was invented by the CIA. Another one is more drastic one, to make people disappear and to avoid things being commented in media. Nobody in Catalonia spoke about the death of Muriel Casals. Nobody has spoken about my internment. These things cannot be commented. If it's not commented in mainstream media, it doesn't exist. And so on and so on. 25 different rules. Another one is the authority argument. When you are challenging why members of the SNP or of the Catalan process are not doing this and that. There's always somebody who knows Nicola Sturgeon or Alex Salmon since they were both in kindergarten, and invoking this authority argument. Well, first, there's no way to know if that is true, so they could be lying. Secondly, a lot of people I had friends for 25 years that thought they fought for independence, and now they're running the Catalan government, and I know they don't, and it took me 25 years to discover. So they can have been lying to these people. But third, you might also be a shield or a British government agent, and you're doing that. So pay attention. Please, all of you that want to awake and be really useful in the fight for independence, it's very interesting that you put your eyes on these 25 rules of disinformation, because then they cannot use it to us. And what's more important, we won't pass it along. It's very sad. There's only a few people who are mean in social media. A lot of few mean people are working for London defending Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP, and referendum, which are the magic triplet to protect the UK. But the vast majority is spreading these 25 rules of disinformation in good faith, because they don't realize that they're simply tools in the hands of our enemies. So it pays to take a look at these 25, and then you really become useful tools in the fight for independence. I would like to introduce Oriol Junqueras to the people outside Catalonia. Oriol Junqueras, as I said, is the Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Prime President in Catalonia. I was in a student union with him 27 years ago, student union called FENEC, that he destroyed to create a splinter union. Then in 2012, when we met him with a friend of mine, Ramon Carné, to try to unite 4 different independentist parties, he is the one that broke unity, because he said that 100 members in Badalona wouldn't accept being all together, which is an argument that a true independence leader would never give. He is somebody that was artificially invented. Out of nowhere, he was brought in to appear in Catalan public radio in 2006, in Catalan public television in 2006. They set up a digital newspaper that they give him to direct or edit in 2008. They created a platform to give him clout called Sobirania y Progrés. From there, he was an independent candidate. It happens a lot in Catalonia. People come out of nowhere and they made independent candidates, and flash, they're running the show in no time at all, because somebody has decided that. Then he became member of Esquerra Republicana de Catalunya, and 9 months after that, he was the president of the party, which must be very interesting from the point of view of rank and file members that have been working and paying quotas for donkey's years, and then somebody is invented out of nowhere, and now he's Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy President of Catalonia. He lied to us royally twice. Once, when he said that if we had 68 members in Parliament for independence, he would declare it. Now we have 72 and he hasn't. So, liar, big liar. He also said that the question for the non-referendum of 9 November 2014 was better than the normal question, which is also a lie, which everybody can see. And this person is linked to Scotland by a famous anecdote. I met him in 2015 in front of Cathedral in Barcelona with Delia, and I told him that I knew for a fact that Nicola Sturgeon was a British mole, which was put at the head of the Scottish government to make impossible independence. And I knew that in Catalonia it was very similar, and he almost had a heart attack and ran away from me, which for me is quite telling that he's been caught in the act. Later, 1 year later, when I did a hunger strike, I gave a flyer of the hunger strike to more than 100 out of 35 members of parliament, and the only one that ran away is Oriol Junqueras. And now he is one of the main actors in this invented referendum. We voted for UDI, we have a majority and a mandate for UDI, and they have invented a referendum to make independence impossible. And Spain has decided that Oriol Junqueras will play the same part of Nicola Sturgeon in a non-independent Catalonia. And nothing could be more perfect than this. You have a party supposedly for independence, but it's not, because it's run by Spanish government shields. And they complain, and they shout, and they do Twitters, and they do everything, but they don't declare independence. So it's perfect for Spain. There's nothing better than having a so-called independentist that actually works for the enemy, because then independence will never come. That's Oriol Junqueras for you, the next president of Catalonia and Spanish Mole. To final this, because we're running out of time, I'll leave the thing about the Scottish process for next week. I just want to give a brief Catalan news. In Catalonia now, sadly, we are busy with ballot boxes for the so-called referendum for the 1st of October. Then Assemblea Nacional Catalana has made a dance. It's so pathetic. 300 years fighting for freedom, and now they're doing a dance that it makes you cringe. But the most relevant thing this week, it's been Catalan Parliament finally has annulled the sentences in court-martial, more than 60,000 sentences in court-martial cases during the dictatorship of Franco. It's historical, David. Makes you think, what has our parliament been doing for 42 years? Something that should have been done in the first year, there in 1980. It's taken 40 years since the death of Franco to do this. Sad. But the worst, and what shows that everything is a show, is that the same day this happens, the same day the court-martial from Franco gets annulled or cancelled, the Spanish king, which is the son of the anointed, appointed, chosen, elected by Franco, Juan Carlos, and he has only been king like for 2 years now. He goes to Girona, one of the main cities in Catalonia, next to the president of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, which is there all meek and mild next to him. Well, that is a shame. First, this independence process is a joke. It's the biggest ride of our lives. It was never about independence for them. They don't care about independence, neither in Scotland, in Catalonia. The only thing they care now is how to impede independence without the Catalan and Scottish people realizing we've been had and going for them. They're really scared for their lives because they've been lying to us. How can you accept in the morning you do something historical to clean the damage Franco did, and then you spend the day being very solicit and subservient to one of Franco's henchmen, Felipe VI. It doesn't stand the chance of being through this Catalan process. But it goes beyond that, because it's totally indignified that you do that. That has been it for today. It's been a pleasure being with you. Please share away. Nowhere else you'll be able to hear the things you hear. But the truth is out, so they cannot avoid it. They cannot avoid people knowing that the whole Catalan and Scottish processes are lies. But we just need your help so everybody learns it on time. It serves to nothing that everybody will know in 2040 that it was a lie when there's no way we can get independence. We need to tell the truth now and declare independence. Good night. Bona nit.
This is Hadrian Radio, coming to you from Free Catalonia, a KA radio production.